Josh Heupel is on the watch list for the Bobby Dodd Award, which goes to the top coach in the nation in college football. What did you make of him being on that list? I can't say that I was incredibly surprised.
I think it says he's one of the best coaches in the country, right? Go ahead, Caleb.
No, that's fine. Yeah, I think it's just I don't know how they come up with the 21 list for the Coach of the Year award, to be honest, because my history has been the coach. And Jimmy, I was wanting to get you on this. My history is typically the people they pick for Coach of the Year are coaches whose teams do well, that they didn't predict to do well. So it's oftentimes media members trying to cover for themselves for not properly researching teams beforehand.
Yeah, well, and here's the thing that's interesting about that is he's on a preseason list. Well, in my opinion, probably the worst year he had at Tennessee was last year. So even though I think he's a really good coach, I didn't think that was the best year that he had, and the way things worked out with Joe Milton. So, yeah, but a lot of times I think you're right, Caleb. It is a coach. Now, you're typically going to have – I hadn't seen the list, so I'm sure Kirby Smart's on it, but you're going to have coaches. Sarkisian's going to be on it, I would think. You're going to have coaches that have succeeded at a high level. You're also going to have coaches that overachieve with the team. That would be a part of that equation. But I think they're kind of useless, right? I mean, so what?
These lists, you almost have to be, and to win it, you almost have to either be dominant or a surprise. That if you're just in the middle good, you're no good for us. You're not a good fit for this award, which is a little bit strange. If you had to predict a mortgage payment, Jimmy, is Josh Heupel going to win the Bobby Dodd Coach of the Year award before all is said and done?
I doubt it. There's so many other candidates out there. I mean, who knows? If he wins 11 games, he can win it. Anything short of that, he may not, because there's going to be somebody else that comes up with a huge season, right? So, I mean, just look at the odds. The odds would be against that. So I would say probably not.
I would actually probably argue the odds would be in his favor if not for one guy, Caleb, named Kirby Smart. If not for him being there, I would say, given 10 years at Tennessee, I would take Josh Heupel to win that award as opposed to not.
I'm going to argue for him being there this year because I think, again, lack of research. I mean, when surprise teams is where Coaches of the Year happen. If Tennessee goes 11-1, plays for the SEC title, gets to the semifinals of the college football playoff, I think they'll vote Josh Heupel Coach of the Year. And I just want to float this to you two because you guys cover the team. Philip Fulmer got Coach of the Year in 1998, as you guys know. When I don't think it was the Bobby Dodd Coach of the Year. Bill Snyder got the Bobby Dodd Coach of the Year. Philip Fulmer got the other Coach of the Year award. I forget which one it was. Maybe it was the Bear Bryant award. Bear Bryant trophy.
Bill Snyder was mad about getting that award because he's mad about everything. But anyway.
My contention for the longest time about the 98 team, because it's considered the Cinderella team. They lost all this star power and went on to win the national title. That comes from national media that did not do their research on that Tennessee football team. Because, yes, Tennessee lost a lot of star power going into 98. But as you guys know, they had about 3 years worth of number one recruiting classes still on that team in 98. So they were still loaded with talent. And Fulmer got Coach of the Year because nobody in the national media had done any research on Tennessee behind Peyton Manning and Leonard Little for 3 years.
Okay. Well, wait a minute. All right. Where was Tennessee ranked preseason that year?
13th.
10th. Was it 13th?
Oh, I thought they were 13th, but maybe in 10th. Sorry.
They were 10th. They were top 10. I predicted them to go 11-1, but I'm not national media, so I don't count. And I had them losing only to Florida. I thought they were a national championship caliber team, but I didn't think they could get past Florida because they hadn't for years, right? So, and I don't know how many in the national media looked at it. I didn't think number 10 in the country was unreasonable for Tennessee, given that they lost 3 first-round picks. It was Manning, Terry Fair, and Marcus Nash, right? Those are the 3 first-round picks they lost.
Yes.
From that team. Okay. So to have them 10th in the country, I thought was reasonable, although I had them going 11-1. But I think when you lose a star power quarterback like that, I think that automatically gives people the perception you're not going to be as good the next year. And frankly, I didn't think they would be better than they were in 97. I mean, did y'all?
No. And I frankly am a little bit surprised you had them as high as 10th. I want to dive into that. Brought to you by the Hemp House, the premier hemp dispensary online with a wide variety and great selection and strict standards to ensure you only receive the best in CBD or Delta products. High quality. HempHouseChatWith2Ts.com. HempHouseChatWith2Ts.com. Use the promo code HOOKED for 10% off. Hooked for 10% off. Caleb,
that's crazy.
You're telling me you lose the best all-time quarterback in your history, and you shouldn't be considered a bit of a long shot to win the national title? I would have them actually lower than 10th. We'll get to Jimmy's thoughts on that too. But Caleb, I mean, you lose the best player you've ever had.
But this is to the point. Jimmy was knee deep in the program, Jimmy. So you knew that, just real quick, Jimmy, you knew how loaded they were even with all the talent they lost, right?
I did. I mean, yeah. I had them higher than 10th. I'm saying the AP poll had them 10th preseason. I had them going 11-1. 11-1 would be higher than 10th in the country.
Oh, okay. Do you remember where you had them preseason by chance?
5 or 6.
Okay. Wow.
Yeah,
okay.
So
Go ahead. Caleb.
Where I was going with this was that, yeah, Jimmy was tied to the program, so he knew. National media did not do their research on how loaded that Tennessee team was, even with the talent they lost. And for those who don't remember, Vegas had Tennessee underdogs in 3 regular season games that year. Vegas had Tennessee underdogs at Syracuse, against Florida, and at Georgia. They had all 3 of those teams favored to win. And they had Tennessee underdogs against Florida State, which was one of the second worst line in Tennessee football history. So the worst line. That was ridiculous. Florida State had a back break.
Yes. I really thought Jimmy would agree with me on this point, but maybe he won't, because he did like the 98 team more preseason than I thought he would have, or that I did anyway. I guess I was putting thoughts in his mind, but I go back to that 98 team, and I think Philip Fulmer, it wasn't the media making up for overlooking him. I felt like he changed the whole offense with the help of David Cutcliffe, obviously, to benefit from T. Martin. I felt like he did a lot of things philosophically and from a big picture standpoint to motivate his team. Whereas this upcoming team, if Josh Heupel were to win the Bobby Dodd Award, I would think it was because they've been largely overlooked, because I think they've addressed some of their deficiencies, but people are unsure if those are the correct answers or not. Does all that make sense, Jimmy?
Yeah, and just going back to 98, I mean, Syracuse had a great quarterback named Donovan McNabb. Tennessee was lucky to get out of there. And T. Martin did not beat Syracuse with his arm. He beat him with his running ability. He ripped off a 64-yard run or something like that. Now, I had them losing to Florida, which they had to beat them in overtime. But and T. Martin did not have a good game against Florida either. He got better. But to your point, Dave, and I agree with this, I thought Tennessee did a really nice job of going from a great passing quarterback in Peyton Manning to a guy that could beat you with his legs. They did have to change the offense. They had a really good offensive line. They had a load of running backs. They had good receivers. But T. Martin was able to make key clutch plays to help them go undefeated. But remember, that team was very close to not going undefeated. They beat Syracuse on a last-second field goal. They beat Florida in overtime, and they were lucky to beat Arkansas, right? I mean, that team could have easily lost 3 games. But I did think to get back to Caleb's original point, they had stackpiled great recruiting classes back to back to back. And so I thought it was a very talented team, but I didn't think they'd win the national championship because I wasn't sure that T. Martin was good enough to do that.
Caleb has a thought he wants to share. Caleb, can you give me 15 seconds so I can tell everybody about Ray Varner Ford?
Go ahead.
There.
Big Ben 4x4, $29,743. A 2024 T250 low roof cargo van, $51,955. 24 model Ford F-150 4x4 crew cab, $46,929. Ray Varner Ford, your East Tennessee Ford dealership.
Great deals and selection to be had at Ray Varner Ford, Caleb.
So I agree with a lot of what you're saying, Jimmy, and they were lucky to escape. But you brought up the Arkansas game. If we were being honest about yes, Fulmer and Cutcliffe did a great job retooling the offense that all season. As a matter of fact, I read something where they actually took the red jersey off T. Martin that year because they wanted him to get hit in practice.
That's correct.
Yeah.
And they might have beat the hell out of Joey Matthews to the point that he couldn't play football anymore, but that's another.
and T wasn't crazy about that move, by the way.
No, T wasn't crazy about that move, and the Matthews family shouldn't have been crazy about that move because I watched that kid play quarterback in high school. He could play, but goodness gracious, that spring put him through. And if you remember too, Jimmy, that was before a lot of guys came in for spring practice, so it was a shock.
So where I met though, it's funny you mentioned the Arkansas game. If we were going to be honest about the coach of the year in 1998. Houston Nutt was the coach of the year in 1998, what he did with that Arkansas team. I think going 9-3 with that Arkansas team was far more impressive than winning a national title with that Tennessee team, if you compare the talent levels of the two.
What hurt Arkansas is they lost their last 3 games. If you had voted when they were 9-0 and ranked in the top 10, I would agree with you. It's tough for me to have a coach of the year who loses the last 3 games.
That's good.
And I will say Houston Nutt didn't have to call a counter run play when all you have to do is run out the clock. That would have made my football IQ list of dumb coaching decisions. Yes, it was around a day.
Yeah.
That was a pretty special moment.